You went and bought a house without even asking what I thought about it, after all the times I told you we could help with the down payment if you just included us in the plans. This isn't just about you anymore, Olivia. You're making decisions that affect the whole family. If you're going to shut me out like this, then don't expect a single cent from me or your father. You're on your own from now on. Hi, my name is Olivia Bennett. I am 31 years old. Those four sentences from my mother on a Tuesday evening phone call were the last real words we exchanged for months. I had just signed the papers on a modest but beautiful three-bedroom townhouse in Providence with my husband Daniel. We had stretched every dollar we had saved, used a small inheritance from his side, and taken on a mortgage that made my stomach twist every time I thought about the numbers. It was ours. After years of renting and dreaming, it finally felt like we were building something permanent. My mother had known we were looking. She had even offered in that careful way she had to help with the down payment if we picked a place closer to her and my father in the suburbs. I had thanked her and said we wanted to stay in the city for Daniel's commute and my work at the small marketing firm downtown. She had gone quiet on the call then, the kind of quiet that used to make me fill the silence with explanations. This time I didn't. I told her we had found the right place and the closing was in 2 weeks. The explosion came the night before closing. She called while Daniel and I were eating takeout on the floor of the empty living room, surrounded by boxes we had started packing. Her voice was tight and controlled at first, then it cracked into something sharper. You really think you can just cut us out of the biggest purchase of your life, she said. Your father and I have been planning for this. We had things set aside. But if you're going to make these decisions without us, then that money stays where it is. I felt the floor tilt under me even though I was already sitting. Mom, we never asked for the money. We told you we were handling it ourselves. That's not the point, she snapped. The point is you didn't even give us the chance to be part of it. Your sister Rachel would never have done something like this without talking to me first. She understands family. Rachel. Of course, my older sister had bought her house 2 years earlier with our parents' help and had let my mother pick out half the furniture. I had watched it happen and told myself it was fine that I didn't need the same thing. Now the comparison landed exactly where my mother wanted it to. I tried to keep my voice steady. We're 31 years old, Mom. Daniel and I wanted to do this our way. There was a long pause. Then she said the words that made the air in the room go thin. Fine, do it your way. But don't come to us when the payments get hard or when you need help with anything. And tell your husband not to expect any family support either. You made your choice. She hung up before I could answer. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear, the half-eaten Thai food going cold between us. Daniel reached over and took the phone out of my hand, setting it on a box labeled kitchen. He didn't say anything right away. He just waited. She cut us off, I finally said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. The money she kept hinting at for years, it's gone. Or it was never really there. She said we're on our own. Daniel exhaled slowly. We were already planning to be on our own. We have the mortgage approved. We close tomorrow. Nothing changes on paper. But everything had changed underneath. The quiet promise my mother had dangled for years that there was family money, a safety net, a way to make big moves easier if we just stayed close and included her, had been yanked away in one phone call. It wasn't even about the actual dollars anymore. It was the way she made the withdrawal feel like punishment. The next morning, we closed on the townhouse. The realtor handed us the keys with a big smile and told us the neighborhood was quiet and the neighbors were friendly. I smiled back and tried to feel the excitement I had carried for weeks. It was there, but it sat next to something colder now. We moved in over the following weekend. My older sister Rachel sent a text saying she was happy for us but couldn't help with the actual moving because she had plans with the kids. My father called once, asked if we needed anything, and when I said no, he sounded relieved. My Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, sent a card with the gift card for a home store inside. The note was short. Congratulations on the new place. Call me if you want to talk. I didn't call. 2 weeks after we moved in, I was unpacking the last of the kitchen boxes when there was a knock at the door. It was Sophia Ramirez from next door holding a plate of cookies and a bottle of wine. She was in her early 40s, worked from home doing something with medical billing, and had the kind of easy warmth that made you want to tell her things you probably shouldn't. I saw the moving truck last week, she said. Figured you could use something that didn't come out of a box. Welcome to the block. We ended up sitting on the back deck with the wine while Daniel ran to the hardware store. Sophia asked easy questions at first where we had moved from what we did for work. Then she said almost casually, "Your mom came by a couple days ago. Parked out front for a while just looking at the house. Didn't come to the door. I thought maybe she was waiting for you." My stomach tightened. She knows the address. I sent it in the group text when we closed. Sophia nodded slowly. She looked upset. Not angry exactly, more like someone who had lost something. Anyway, if you ever need anything, a cup of sugar, someone to watch the place when you're gone, or just someone to vent to, I'm right here. I thanked her and changed the subject, but the image of my mother sitting in her car staring at our new house stayed with me. A few days later, the first real escalation hit. My mother started a group text with me, my father, Rachel, and my Aunt Helen. The message was long and carefully worded. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about family support and expectations. Since Olivia has decided to go her own way with the house, I've had to reconsider some of the financial plans I had in place for everyone. I wanted to let you all know so there are no surprises later. Rachel replied almost immediately with a string of heart emojis. And I understand, Mom. My father sent a single, okay. My Aunt Helen sent nothing. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. She wasn't just cutting me off privately anymore. She was making it a family announcement, framing it as me choosing to go my own way. The silent treatment had begun, but it wasn't silent at all. It was loud in every group chat and every family call I wasn't included in. That night, I sat on the floor of our new living room with Daniel and told him everything. The years of hints about money that was there if we needed it. The way my mother had always made big decisions feel like joint family projects that she got final say on. The way Rachel had played along and been rewarded for it. I don't want to fight with her, I said. I just want to live in our house and not have every choice run through her first. Daniel took my hand. Then we live in our house, we pay our mortgage, we build what we're building. If she wants to make it a war, that's her choice. I wanted to believe it was that simple. But the next morning, I woke up to another group text. This one was from my Aunt Helen, sent only to me. Can we meet for coffee? There's something I think you should see. It's about your mom and some old family stuff. It might explain a few things. I stared at the message for a long time before I answered. Part of me wanted to delete it and keep the fragile piece I had started building in the new house. Another part of me needed to know what old family stuff could possibly be worth digging up now. I typed back when and where. She suggested a cafe downtown the following afternoon. I almost canceled 3 times before I left the house. When I walked in, Helen was already there at a corner table with a thick manila envelope in front of her. She looked tired. "I'm not here to take sides," she said after we ordered. "But I've watched this pattern for years. Your mother has a way of making people feel like they owe her something that was never really offered. I found some old things when I was cleaning out my attic last month. Photos from when your grandparents were still around, some documents mixed in. I think you should have them. She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were old printed photographs, some with faded dates on the back, and a few printed pages that look like bank statements or letters. One photo in particular caught my eye, my mother and father standing in front of what looked like a lawyer's office, dated almost 15 years earlier. The metadata on the digital scan Helen had made showed the file had been created recently, but the original photo carried an older timestamp. I don't know what all of it means yet, Helen said quietly. But I know she's been telling people for years that there was money set aside from your grandparents. I also know she's been living like that money existed even when the accounts didn't support it. I'm not saying she lied to hurt you. I'm saying she lied to herself first and then to everyone else to keep control. I left the cafe with the envelope in my bag and my hand shaking. The new house suddenly felt both like a victory and like the thing that had finally made the ground under my family give way. I didn't tell Daniel about the meeting right away. I needed to sit with it first. That evening, while I was making dinner in our new kitchen, my phone lit up with another group text. This one was from my mother, sent to everyone again. I've decided it's best if we take some space as a family while everyone figures out their priorities. I won't be hosting Thanksgiving this year. Rachel, you and the kids are welcome at our place. Olivia, I assume you'll be busy with your new house. No one replied in the chat. The silence after that message felt louder than any argument. I stood at the stove stirring pasta and felt something settle in my chest that I couldn't name yet. It wasn't anger anymore, it was something colder and clearer. My mother had drawn the line. She had made the exclusion public and final in her own way. Now I had a choice about whether I was going to keep trying to step over it or whether I was going to accept that the line was there and build my life on the side I had already chosen. Sophia texted me later that night, saw your mom's car again today. She didn't get out. Just sat there for about 20 minutes. You okay? I stared at the message for a long time before I answered. I think I might be getting there. But even as I typed it, I knew the real test was still coming. The envelope from my aunt was sitting on the counter like a bomb with a very slow fuse. And somewhere in those old photos and papers was a truth that was going to change how I saw every conversation I had ever had with my mother. I just didn't know yet how much it was going to cost me to look at it. The next morning, I sat at our new kitchen island with the envelope spread open in front of me, like evidence from a crime scene I hadn't known I was investigating. Sunlight came through the window and hit the old photographs, making the faded colors look almost cheerful. One picture showed my mother and father standing outside a law office downtown, my mother smiling in a way I rarely saw anymore. The timestamp on the back was from 15 years ago. The digital metadata Helen had included when she scanned it told a different story. The file had been created on her computer only last month. Someone had gone looking for these on purpose. I picked up the printed bank statements mixed in with the photos. They were old from an account I didn't recognize. The balances were low, then zero, then negative in places. There were notes scribbled in my mother's handwriting on some of the pages. Things like covered by loan and don't tell the girls. My stomach turned. For years, she had talked about the money my grandparents had set aside. For us, the safety net that was always there if we stayed close and made the right choices. These papers didn't look like a safety net. They looked like someone desperately trying to make it seem like one existed. I called Sophia first because she was the only person who had seen my mother sitting outside the house. She answered on the second ring. Everything okay over there? She asked. I told her about the envelope without giving too many details. She listened quietly, then said, "If you want a second set of eyes on any of that, or if you need help figuring out what the dates actually mean, I'm decent with that kind of thing. I digitize old records for work sometimes. No pressure." I thanked her and said I might take her up on it. Then I did something I had been putting off for days. I looked up Claire Montgomery, the family law attorney whose name had come up in a local Facebook group for new homeowners dealing with boundary issues. I didn't know if I needed a lawyer yet, but the documents in front of me made the ground feel less solid than it had the day we closed on the house. I booked a consultation for the end of the week. That same afternoon, the group text lit up again. This time it was my older sister Rachel, but I could hear my mother's voice in every word. "Mom is really hurting over how things have gone with the house. She feels like you've pulled away from the family on purpose. Dad and I think it would help if you just reached out and apologized for not including her more in the plans. She's not asking for much." I stared at the message until the words stopped making sense. Apologize for buying a house with my husband, for not letting her pick the neighborhood or approve the mortgage. I typed and deleted 3 different replies before I finally sent one. "I'm not apologizing for making a decision with my husband about our own home. If Mom wants to talk, she knows where I am." Rachel didn't answer, neither did anyone else. The chat went quiet in that heavy way that felt louder than shouting. 2 days later, I sat across from Claire Montgomery in her small office near the river. She was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed with a stack of files on her desk that made me feel like I was one small problem in a long line of them. I laid out the photos and the statements without naming anyone at first. "I'm not sure what I'm even asking," I told her. "I just know my mother has been using the idea of family money as leverage for years, and these papers make it look like that money was never really there the way she described it." Claire flipped through the pages slowly. "Metadata on the photos is interesting," she said. "It shows when the digital copies were made versus when the originals were taken. That can matter if anyone ever tries to claim certain agreements were in place. As for the statements, they don't prove fraud on their own, but they do show a pattern of someone managing appearances around money. If your mother ever tries to claim you owe her something based on promises she made, these could be useful to have." She leaned back in her chair. "The bigger question is what you want to do with the information. Are you looking to confront her, protect yourself legally, or just understand what you're dealing with so you can set better boundaries?" I didn't have a clean answer. "I think I just want to stop feeling like I'm waiting for the next punishment every time I make a choice she doesn't like." Claire nodded once. "Then start documenting everything. Every text, every conversation. And decide now what your non-negotiables are. Because once you draw a line, some people will test how serious you are about keeping it." I left her office with a folder of notes and a heavier sense of what was coming. On the drive home, I got a call from my Aunt Helen. "I heard you met with someone," she said carefully. "I'm not going to ask who, but your mother knows about the envelope." I didn't tell her, but Rachel mentioned I gave you some old photos. She's not happy. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What does she want?" Helen was quiet for a second too long. "She wants the originals back. She says they're family property and you have no right to them. She also said if you don't return them, she's going to have to rethink a few other things she's been holding on to for you and Daniel." The line went quiet, except for the sound of traffic. I pulled into our driveway and sat there with the engine running. "What other things?" I asked. Helen sighed. "I don't know the details, but she's been talking like there are accounts or papers with both your names on them from when you were younger. Things she was managing." I think she's implying she could make accessing them difficult. I felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was the way she kept finding new levers to pull the second I stopped playing by her rules. That night, I showed Daniel the documents. We spread them out on the kitchen island under the new pendant lights we had installed ourselves. He read through the statements without saying much at first. "She's been lying about this for a long time," he said finally, or at least letting everyone believe something that wasn't true. "And now that you're not asking for permission anymore, she's using it as a weapon." I nodded. My throat felt tight. Claire said to document everything. I think I need to start doing that. Daniel reached across the counter and took my hand. "We can handle whatever comes, but you don't have to handle her alone." The next morning, the group text exploded again. This time, it was my mother directly. "I've been patient, but this has gone far enough. Those photos and papers belong to the family. I expect them returned by the end of the week. And until then, I think it's best if we pause any other conversations about support or future plans." Rachel agrees this is the healthiest approach for everyone. Rachel had liked the message within minutes. I didn't reply. Instead, I took screenshots of the entire thread, saved them in a folder on my phone labeled documentation, and then I called Sophia. She answered like she had been waiting. "You sound like you're standing on the edge of something." "I think I am," I said. "Can you come over? I want another set of eyes on these dates and numbers before I decide what to do next." She was at the door 20 minutes later with a laptop and a careful expression. We sat at the kitchen table and went through every photo. The metadata on one in particular stood out: a picture of my mother and grandparents that had been taken the same week the bank statements showed a large withdrawal. The digital file had been accessed and resaved multiple times over the years, always around the times my mother brought up the family money in conversation. Sophia pointed at the screen. "This doesn't prove she invented the whole thing," she said quietly. "But it does show she's been managing the story around these documents for a long time. And now she's panicking because you have copies." I felt the pieces shifting into place with a sick kind of clarity. The leverage had never been real money sitting in an account. The leverage had been the story itself, the idea that there was something I could lose if I stopped including her in every decision. That evening, while Daniel was making dinner, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was my mother calling from the landline at their house. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice was calm in a way that made my skin prickle. "I know you've been talking to people," she said. "Lawyers, neighbors, your aunt. I'm not going to fight with you in public, Olivia. But I need you to understand something. If you keep pushing this, if you keep choosing to stand apart from this family, there are consequences that go beyond hurt feelings. Some things that were meant to be shared can be unshared. Some doors can close permanently." I gripped the edge of the counter. "What doors, Mom?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Just return the papers and think very carefully about what kind of relationship you want with the people who raised you." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in our new kitchen with the smell of garlic and onions filling the air and felt the floor shift again. This wasn't about a house anymore. It wasn't even about money that may or may not have existed. It was about control, and she was showing me exactly how far she was willing to go to keep it. Later that night, I sat on the back deck with Sophia while Daniel cleaned up inside. The air was cool and the neighborhood was quiet except for someone's television through an open window down the block. "You don't have to decide everything tonight," Sophia said. "But whatever you do next, make sure it's something you can live with when the dust settles. Because once you draw a hard line with someone like her, they don't usually come back with an apology. they come back with new rules. I looked out at the small yard we had just started planning. The fence needed staining. The flower beds were still empty. It was ours. Messy and unfinished and completely ours. I know I said. I just didn't think the cost of keeping it would be this high. Sophia didn't try to fix it. She just sat with me in the quiet until the lights in the houses around us started going out one by one. Inside, my phone buzzed with another group text. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it would say. The pressure was building. The documents were sitting on the counter like a lit fuse. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, my mother was still trying to make my choices feel like betrayals. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep standing in the middle without choosing a side that would break something I couldn't put back together. The group text stayed open on my phone like an accusation I couldn't close. I read my mother's demand 3 times before I turned the screen face down on the counter. The old photographs and printed statements were still spread across the kitchen island under the pendant lights we had chosen together. Every time I looked at them, the metadata timestamps felt louder than any words she had sent. I spent the next 2 days doing exactly what Claire had told me to do. I saved every message, every missed call, every screenshot of the group chats where my older sister liked my mother's posts but never texted me directly. I made copies of the documents and left the originals in a folder on the counter. Daniel asked once if I wanted to just mail them back and be done with it. I told him I wasn't ready to hand over the only proof I had that the story my mother had built around money had never been solid. On the 3rd day, my Aunt Helen called again. Her voice was careful, almost apologetic. "She's asking me to come get the papers from you," Helen said. "She says if you won't bring them yourself, I should pick them up." I told her I wasn't going to be her messenger, but she's not listening to much right now. I sat on the back deck with the phone on speaker so Daniel could hear. "Tell her I'll meet her. One time, I want to give them back in person and say what I need to say." Helen was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "No," I answered, "but I'm done pretending this is going to fix itself if I just stay quiet." We agreed on neutral ground, a small park near the river not far from the house we had just bought. I asked Claire if she would come with me, not as my lawyer, but as someone who had already seen the documents and could keep me from getting pulled into the old patterns. She said she would wait in her car nearby and step in only if things turned ugly. Sophia offered to watch the house while we were gone. "Text me when you're on your way back," she said. "And if you need somewhere to land afterward that isn't empty, my door is open." The morning of the meeting, I woke up before the sun. I packed the folder with the originals into my bag and left a copy with Daniel. He kissed me at the door and said the only thing that mattered: "Whatever happens in that park, you come home to this house. That's the part that doesn't change." I nodded because my throat was too tight for words. My mother was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench near the water, with her coat buttoned all the way up even though it wasn't cold. My Aunt Helen stood a few feet away, arms crossed, looking like she would rather be anywhere else. My older sister, Rachel, was not there. That detail landed harder than I expected. My mother didn't stand when I approached. She looked at the bag in my hand and then at my face. "You brought them?" she said. It wasn't a question. I sat on the other end of the bench, leaving space between us. "I did. But I'm not just dropping them off and leaving." Helen shifted her weight but didn't come closer. My mother's mouth tightened. "I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish by dragging other people into this," she said. "Lawyers, neighbors, your aunt, you've turned something private into a spectacle." I opened the folder on my lap and took out the photograph with the clearest metadata. This picture was taken the week you told us the money from Grandma and Grandpa was secure. The bank statements you kept with it show the account was already empty. You've been telling that story for 15 years. I just want to know why. For the first time since I was a child, my mother looked genuinely caught off guard. Her eyes flicked to the photo and then away. That money was always complicated, she said after a moment. Your father and I made decisions to protect the family. You wouldn't understand. I'm 31, I said. I bought a house without your help. I think I can understand a bank statement. Her face changed then. The careful control cracked into something sharper, more unstable. You think buying a house makes you an expert on family? She said, her voice rising. You think you can just take what you want and shut the rest of us out. Your sister understands loyalty. She didn't need lawyers and neighbors to tell her how to treat her own mother. The words hit exactly where she aimed them. I felt the old reflex to explain myself rise up, and I pushed it back down. I'm not asking for your money, I said. I never was. I'm asking you to stop punishing me for living my life without running every decision past you first. And I'm telling you that if the only way you know how to stay close is by holding something over my head, then I can't keep doing this. My mother stood up. Her hands were shaking. Fine, she said. You want to be on your own? You want to believe whatever story your aunt and your lawyer fed you. Keep the papers. I don't need them. But don't come back when you realize what you've thrown away. And don't expect your father or your sister to keep choosing between us. They already made their choice. She turned and walked toward the parking lot without looking back. Helen stayed where she was for a moment, then crossed the grass and sat on the bench beside me. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't know she would go that far. I closed the folder. You gave me the truth when no one else would. That's more than I expected. Helen nodded once. For what it's worth, the accounts she was talking about were closed years ago. There was never anything left to unshare. She just couldn't stand the idea of you not needing the story anymore. The irony landed with a quiet, bitter clarity. All the leverage, all the threats, all the years of careful control had been built on something that had already disappeared. The documents didn't give me power over her. They just showed me that the power she had held over me was mostly smoke. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. Claire followed at a distance until I texted her that I was safe. Sophia was waiting on her front steps when I pulled into the driveway. She didn't ask what happened. She just handed me a cup of coffee and sat with me on the curb until Daniel came outside and wrapped his arms around me from behind. That night, I blocked my mother's number. I blocked my older sister's number too. I left the group chat without saying goodbye. I kept Helen's number for now, but I told her I needed space from anything that still connected back to the old patterns. She understood. In the weeks that followed, the silence from my family was complete. My father sent one short email asking if I was all right. I answered that I was and that I hoped he was too. He didn't reply again. Rachel never reached out. My mother's social media stayed active with pictures of family dinners I wasn't invited to, but the posts never mentioned me. The house we had bought became both sanctuary and reminder. Some nights I stood in the living room and felt the weight of what I had lost, pressing against the walls we had painted together. Other nights I felt something lighter, the strange quiet freedom of no longer waiting for the next text that would tell me I had done something wrong by living my life. Claire helped me set up a simple trust for the house in both our names so there would be no confusion later. Sophia became the person I called when the silence felt too loud. Daniel and I started planning small things for the yard, the kind of ordinary future that didn't require anyone else's permission. One evening in early fall, I sat on the back deck with the last of the old photographs in my lap. I had kept the picture of my mother and grandparents from the week the account went empty. The metadata was still there if I ever needed it, but I didn't think I would. I slid the photo into a drawer and closed it. I had walked away from the only version of family I had ever known. There was no dramatic reconciliation waiting on the other side, no apology that would make the years make sense. There was only the house we had chosen, the life we were building, and the clear, steady knowledge that I could survive the cost of choosing myself. Some days that knowledge felt like strength. Other days it just felt like the truth I had finally stopped running from. Thank you for listening to my story. If someone who was supposed to be your safety net had spent years holding you close with stories that weren't true and then punished you the moment you tried to stand on your own, what would you do?